I was talking about being in Bitton, Southampton yesterday, and how it reminded me of the day on which Ken Browning, member of a pawn ring, died. One of the things which came up when I was poring over my parents' documents, photos, letters, anything and everything, one of the things which came up was a card for accident and emergency at the General Hospital on the 22nd of February 1989 for my mother, which is to say that on the day that Ken Browning died, my mother had attended accident and emergency in the morning of that day. I now have to produce the card. I have a much clearer idea of where that is than I do of where the notepaper with Greg Byworth's header on it is. I can find that as soon as I get back to Wales, assuming I get back to Wales. So the sequence for that day is that for a reason unknown to me, and I never remember being told about it, my mother attended an accident and emergency at the General Hospital in the morning. For some reason, my ex-husband and I were in Bitton in the afternoon. And for some equally strange reason, Ken Browning was looking for me in Bitton that afternoon. That there is no doubt about. I remember him peering in the windows of the shops that I was in. Unfortunate that I saw him, but he didn't see me, retrospectively. That evening, given that she'd been to accident and emergency in the morning, my mother went to an evening class, a glass engraving class. Probably the first time in years, decades, she'd been allowed to socialise with other human beings outside the family. Anyway, she was attending these classes. And my ex-husband went down to pick her up from this class, at which point Ken Browning arrived on my doorstep and I let him in. And then he told me he had chest pains, etc., and wouldn't let me call a doctor. Well, if it were now, I would say I'm calling an ambulance, in fact, but there we go, I didn't then. In those days, I was a sleepwalker. I pretty much did what the men in my life told me to do, or not to do. I did finally, as I said, when my ex returned from picking my mother up from her class, say to him, "We need to get Ken to the hospital." And he did agree to that. And from then I have described, I'm sure, that we only got as far as the car park. And in the car park, Ken fell. Not face forwards, he fell sideways. A bit like a tree being felled. And it was quite easy for me to believe that he was dead as he fell, which I was told at some point. Because otherwise, why would he not put out his hands to save himself? And he didn't. He fell into a car, to be precise, and banged his head on the car. So he had a wound on his forehead. And he was then face down on the ground. I thought he was breathing at that point. And had to go up to my flat to call an ambulance. No mobiles, landline. And while I was in the flat, my ex was with Ken. I'm sure I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. That did worry me, because they had not infrequently threatened to kill each other, and I believed them. You would think they were love rivals rather than actually working together, which they were. But you can't account for the male ego, sorry. As with my father, I believed my husband to be perfectly capable of killing. Among the many occasions when he was violent towards me, he had very nearly strangled me. Among many other things. I don't have a problem believing that either my father or my ex-husband were capable of murder. And given that, here we go. Given that my ex-husband was also a member of the Porn Ring and worked on the cover for it, which was a Lonely Hearts mag, the name of which I'm trying desperately to remember. Was it Heart to Heart or something? I'm not quite sure. They all have, the names of these magazines are all much of a muchness, and it's nearly 30 years ago. But anyway, my husband was working with Ken and Greg Byworth on this magazine, which was the cover for the Porn Ring. So quite apart from any hatred that my ex might have entertained for Ken anyway, and he did hate him sometimes when he wasn't working with him. Quite apart from that, my husband knew that if Ken went to court, his name would come up. In the few minutes I was gone, it occurred to me then, as well as now, it occurred to me then that my ex could finish Ken off. And I don't know if he did. I thought it then as well, which is quite unusual because I was such a sleepwalker then, that it was a very conscious thought then. Still wondering why my mother was at an accident and emergency that morning of the day that Ken died. And also wondering why, if Ken, who lived in Lord's Hill, Southampton, very close to the General Hospital, if he had chest pains and suspected he was about to have a heart attack, why on earth did he spend the afternoon on the opposite side of the city, Bitton, searching for me, and then come to my flat, presumably at a time when he knew I would be alone there, or at least there would be no adults there, instead of taking himself to hospital? And why does the death certificate say he died at the General Hospital if he in fact died at my flat? Which I was told he did.